Hey guys, welcome to Emergent Leadership. I'm fortunate enough to be here with Ernie Rodriguez, Chief of EMS for Austin, City of Austin, Texas. Thanks for being with us this morning, Ernie.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Great. My name is Brett Lyle. I'm your hostess. So just want to jump right in. So Ernie, you and I have known each other for a little while, but for those that don't know you or aren't familiar with you and your career, do you mind kind of sharing with everybody a little bit your path to leadership?
Well, Brett, I think I may be exposing myself here just a little bit, but I started off in emergency medical services in 1981. And I know that there's some people who are watching that are going to have to look up and see if that year actually happened. But way back, I started off as an EMT in the fire service, and then moved quickly into paramedicine also in the fire service. And I worked in the field as a field medic. And that's where I picked up a lot of what I thought was important about EMS, is just doing that job and experiencing it day to day. So after a few years of doing that, there was an opportunity to apply as an assistant director of the system that I was in Corpus Christi. And so I went ahead and applied for that, thinking this would be a great experience to just kind of go through the process. And lo and behold, I was selected to be the assistant director. So that shifted my attention away from actually providing hands-on services to how do you support the folks that are doing that work? What kind of policies do you need? What kind of protocols should you be looking? Where do you get the resources to do all this kind of stuff? And I had to learn all of that, on the fly, because there wasn't any kind of education or training for EMS leaders or managers way back then.
Yeah, on-the-job training. Whoever heard of such a thing?
Right. And so I continued down that road and eventually worked with the state of Texas for a few years and learned about all of that. Then went over to MedStar. I spent 10 years having all kinds of fun at MedStar, learning about high-performance systems. That was great, and I enjoyed it. I also worked in the office of the medical director there. So I learned a little bit about that perspective as well. How does a medical director view an EMS system that they're working at? And so there was a lot of cool lessons in that experience. Then I moved over to Austin and came to work for the city of Austin. That's where I'm at now. And started off as a deputy chief. And within about 2 years, I was promoted to chief. And I've been doing that ever since. Mm-hmm. So now I've done about 14 years here. And I'm having the time of my life. It's a great experience.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that with us. And I think there's, one thing people may not know is that you actually owned your own business at one point, didn't you?
That's right. I did. I had a business doing back-end database programming for websites. And so somebody would come to me and say, hey, I want to run this website that registers people to do this, that, and whatever, takes payments or whatever. And I would program the back end so that it would work on the front end.
That's
so
incredible.
I learned a lot of cool stuff about user interfaces and making things work quickly and storing data and moving data back and forth. I had a great time doing that. I did that about 2 years, and then it got too big to manage. So I switched and did something else.
Sure. Yeah, it's incredible. I think there's a lot of stories that people, leaders that are in the industry in EMS and healthcare that have been in the industry so long, people forget that there was a career, there was a time before EMS. Mm-hmm. So I'm always interested to know what is that full story, because I think people in the industry know you, as Ernie from City of Austin, right? And they know you as EMS chief. But that piece of you is interesting, and I'm sure it's shaped you in a lot of ways. Was there anything?
Well, it helped. When I came to Austin, I saw a lot of needs in data administration, and we had lots of information, but it was scattered across many different platforms. And so I helped bring in the first business intelligence system into the city, which was in our EMS department, where we consolidated all of our data and began producing reports and learning about what things we needed to do and how we needed to do them based on data, which was a really cool experience. And I got to reach way back into that old experience and bring some of that forward.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I think is pretty incredible. And Ernie, you've done a really great job. You lead a large organization. You mentioned a high performance system at MedStar Mobile Healthcare, which is in Fort Worth, Texas. and a few other cities that you had worked in Texas. But tell me a little bit about Austin and the system in Austin, if you don't mind, so our audience knows kind of what you're managing, and then we'll talk about the how.
Well, Austin has been a very unique experience because when I got here, Austin was still a little town. And we were really excited about being that little town. It just happened to be the capital of Texas.
Right.
But we've watched the city grow and become more and more urbanized. And now we're seeing gentrification happening in old neighborhoods and all kinds of huge growth. I think there's some days when we're driving up and down the interstate, looking towards the city and counting the number of cranes that are actually building these huge buildings downtown, and got to watch how our profile changed and how we look differently. And so it's been a very interesting event to see, you know, how a community evolves. But the other thing about Austin is that it's very community centric, and it's very highly involved, and our community speaks very loudly to all issues happening in Austin. And so that's different. When I was at MedStar, that culture is different, and we didn't have the input constantly coming from our community as we have now here in Austin. And so I found myself involved in meetings and engagement and different processes that I had to learn about because I wasn't used to, and are not real common in EMS.
Right.
And so the culture is very different here in Austin. It's fast moving, it's young, it's innovative. We have a lot of technology. So we're constantly challenged to keep thinking, keep moving, stay on our toes. And there's tons of resources throughout our community. We were working heavily with the medical school, for example, doing all kinds of different research and focused on EMS, which is, I think, is going to be a great addition to the industry once that research begins to mature and come out.
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot of, obviously, you know, for those who don't live in Texas, there's a lot of growth happening, you know, even in the last 10 years in every large city in Texas. But Austin is, you know, really become kind of the secondary Silicon Valley. And so there are a lot of these technology companies, and you know your city better than I do, but a lot of transition from larger corporations, specifically in technology industry, who've moved to Austin and really have, as you said, Ernie, changed the landscape of the city, but also the demographics and the mindsets. And so I think it's interesting to hear you talk about the culture and how those cities operate. Also funny, for those of you who don't know, you know, Austin, I always say the analogy, Austin is to Texas as New York City is to New York. Like, if you've been to Austin, you don't know Texas in some respects. And so, you know, obviously we're very proud of our capital. It's a beautiful city. You know, I'm fortunate to have a great leader who understands that, but it is culturally different. So how do you manage those things? I know you said that there's the community that's vocal, very engaged, which I love. How have you seen that play out in your role, Ernie? And have you had to be in boards and meetings? What are some of those groups that you've connected into that you may not have otherwise been connected into if you weren't in Austin specifically?
Well, we do have several boards and commissions that come up, and sometimes they're stood up and stood down. Just kind of depends on what's going on, but there's a huge amount of accountability here. I have 3 groups that I report to right now, and they have different interests. And so we have to stay on top of what is interesting to each of those groups and be front and center when the time comes. And so, you know, with some of the more recent events that we've had in the protests, there's been an additional committee put together to review public safety, and EMS is a key player in that. So we've had to stay on top of that information.
Sure.
We also have another mission that is very interested in budget issues, and so we're constantly having to prepare for that. And then, of course, we have all of our council members who need information to make decisions, and we're always in communication with them, providing whatever information they want about the agency. And I've already mentioned that there's a lot of research opportunities here. So we actually have put together a policy for how to manage requests for research, because we get so many requests. And in the past, I'd say week, we've reviewed 2 proposals just in the past week. And so we're doing that while working with others that are already in progress. So we have those kinds of groups. And then we have the neighborhood groups, communities that have special interests. We have Hispanic groups, we have Black groups, we have all different kinds of groups that have interest in the services that we provide. And so we're constantly communicating with those. And so some of the stuff that I've had to do to manage has been really interesting.
Right.
So one of the things that I think we have here is we have a PIO team now of 3 dedicated personnel. That is what they do. They've got the training, the certifications, they've got the experience now, and they're constantly in communication with the media. They're constantly answering requests for information. They're constantly putting out tweets, and Facebook is pretty big, so we keep up with that, and various different media that we're constantly rolling out information.
Right.
And we have some that's dedicated strictly to release, and some that's dedicated to public domain. And so it depends on what the subject is. But you can imagine, one is putting out information about a traffic accident and asking people to avoid an intersection, while another group is putting out information about how you avoid heat stroke,
Right.
and how do you take care of yourself, and how to protect yourself from COVID, all information, all at the same time.
Right. Well, in a large metropolitan city, all that's always going on at the same time. So I think it's great to hear that people are engaged from a community perspective, because I think that's one of the biggest challenges as an industry that we have, is that general public does not understand EMS. They don't always understand what happens when you call 911, what happens when the ambulance shows up. So I won't even dive into the billing side of it, but just from a response perspective, they don't know who's going to show up. So I commend people in my life who are not in the industry who can even answer that question. Hey, is your is the fire department going to respond, or is it a private EMS, or is it a third service? And they look at you cross-eyed most of the time. So it's pretty incredible to hear that you've got an engaged community, and I'm sure, Ernie, that is not coincidence. So how do you continue that engagement? I know words are important to you, and you do a really great job of connecting even with your 600 plus employees. What kind of tools and tricks do you use to stay connected to your frontline field folks and stay accessible?
Yeah, I think any tool I can find. We use everything. I mentioned social media. We do a lot of communication via social media every day. And I don't know if you've noticed, but I keep tapping my phone, and that's because things keep popping through. And so we're constantly in communication in that way. But I do think that words matter. I think that what's important is that you select the words to use when you're communicating that are sincere and that are trustworthy, and that people understand that when you say, I care about you, they know you mean it. And it's not just some line that you're saying because leaders are supposed to say that. Leaders are supposed to care. And you have to figure out how to communicate that squarely so that people get it and believe it. And, and the other thing is it doesn't really matter how much you try to communicate. You have to also understand that some people will believe you, some people will not, some people will agree, some people will not. And you have all the different groups that you have to communicate with all the time. So I believe being factual is important. It's not about taking sides. It's not about swaying decisions. It's about, here's the facts, here's the information, and here's the honest to goodness truth. And if you can provide that, it may be a little dry. It may not be as exciting as drama that you could insert into language. But what is important is that folks will see that and say, okay, I get it. This is happening this many times, and the frequency is this, and I see why we're having to do this. Right. And so doesn't mean that you have to agree with it. It just is the facts. Right. And so I think that's really, really important.
Sure. Well, and especially in a governmental agency, or in a city, you're you're a leader in that, and staying true to that is what makes you accountable, because it's not about that opinions or subjective truth. It's objective. Here's what happened. Where do we go from here? So kind of removing the emotion from it, I think, allows for a lot of conversations to be more safe and more, while sometimes uncomfortable, facts are the facts. And so I think that's interesting. Now, you've also done something, specifically, you guys as an agency have used words to name a program. So tell me a little bit about your community health program.
Well, we started our community health program way back in 2006, before it was cool. In fact, I remember going to one of my advisory boards and presenting the concept of the community health paramedic program, and I had only been here 2 weeks, and so I was a fairly new face to them. I think it was the first time that they were going to see me, and my idea was to present about the need for community health paramedicine in this community. And boy, did I read it wrong. That's a case where I didn't know all the individuals. I didn't know the group. I didn't take time to learn about them. They did not receive that message well. They thought it was the most horrible idea they've ever heard, and they thought it was a big duplication of effort. And we already had community health nurses, and they were doing a wonderful job, and we didn't need to do this. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to get fired. I've only been here 2 weeks. And an idea that I think matters. So we continued to work on the program. We were focused on how do we deal with individuals who call us over and over and over again. And at the time, the agency was considering taking legal action against people for doing that. So basically abusing a system. And my position was different. So being brand new, I didn't know really what I was stepping into, which actually worked in my favor, I think. And what I did is I said, okay, so we need to rethink what's happening here. The individuals who are calling us 20 times a day are giving us many opportunities to get it right. Apparently we missed something. We missed it 19 times. So maybe on the 20th time we can get it right. And so what we tried is we took one of our paramedics and asked him to call our most frequent user every day by 9 a.m. and say, how are you doing? What do you need today? How can I help you? And that eliminated the calls to 911. Then we found ourselves challenged with, okay, where did we get that prescription? Okay, so blankets. Don't know. We'll have to look and see where we can get you some of those. We don't stock them for us. And so, all these different needs. New pair of socks? Okay, so let's go look for those new pairs. Whatever it was that was needed that day, that's what we had to figure out how to get. And so from that very first baby step, we started learning about the need for building a network for all those things that we don't normally do in EMS, but there's other areas of the community that do very, very well. And so we began to link up with all of these other social services that were being provided and found ways to refer and to get aid to persons that need it when they need it, especially if it wasn't something that we're really good at. And so that program has continued to grow. And we kind of took a little bit different approach, I think. I think many agencies who looked at community health or MIH, as some are calling it, the mobile integrated healthcare, tend to look at it from the payer side. What can we get paid for? And then we can do that. And then we've got more revenue coming in. Well, I had a really unique opportunity in Austin. Once our city council members began to see the results that we were having on the lives of individuals in their communities. And like I said, our community is very engaged. They don't hesitate calling their council member and saying, hey, I want you to know there's a problem. Or, hey, something cool just happened. I got this and this got happened and EMS did this and they sent somebody and they call me every day. Before you know it, they're asking me about what they can do to help out with that. Yeah. And they start adding resources to that. And never once did the question about how do we get paid for that come up. what did come up was, how do we serve better? How do we make sure that more people get this? How can we expand the program? And what's the impact on delivery of service? Does it reduce the calls you have? Does it change the nature? What does it do? So we really took truly a community health approach. We began to view ourselves as an equity provider because many of the individuals who were calling us and needed our help were facing an inequity, and that inequity is access to healthcare.
Right.
They simply did not have the network or the social capital or whatever it is that they need to connect to healthcare. So in that sense, we became an equalizer. And we even changed our mission statement on that. And we thought about that. You mentioned words and the value of words. We decided to pick something really simple that says what we do. And really, we provide great, excellent healthcare to anyone, anytime, any place. And it's really that simple because anyone, anytime, any place spells equity. And it is what we do every day. And so from that perspective, the community health paramedic program fit right in. And now that program has expanded quite a bit, where we have a group that specializes on working with persons who are experiencing homelessness. Sure. And we have a group, a very small group, but it's a group that we have that works on individuals who are experiencing opioid overdoses and need rehabilitation. So we're connecting them many times, giving them rides and getting them and advocating for them so that they can get the treatment that they need to change their lives. Right. Our motto is to change the lives of the people we serve. So one of the early things that we said, again, as words matter, is that saving a life sometimes is very easy compared to changing one. And so we decided to focus on how do you change a life?
Right.
So you go to somebody's emergency, you find them not breathing, you see the signs of an overdose, you give them Narcan and they recover. Okay, is that the end of the call or the beginning? And for us, that's the beginning. And the beginning is, how do we now work with these individuals to change their lives so this doesn't happen again? And so that it's a little bit different approach.
It's a lot of
but it works.
Different approach. Yeah. And I think one that's important as again, as we move forward as an industry, whether that's EMS, whether that's healthcare, you said it, nail on the head. This is a human thing, right? This is about caring for people. And when you take that approach, even in a city as large, as politically charged as the capital of our state of Texas, that people take, those conversations away from what's the budget, can we afford it, can we pay for it, what do we need to do, to how do we make this work? So through words, Ernie, it sounds like you and your peers and other leaders in the city have transitioned that mindset through words away from, can we make it work, to how do we make it work? And that's where you get in a space where you can really be innovative and you can really make a difference. That's, I shook my head a little bit when you said it's not about saving lives, it's about changing them. And it just gives me goosebumps, because that's why so many people, I'm sure yourself included, get into healthcare. Care, that's a caregiver statement if I've ever heard one. And being true to that mission and the agency is pretty incredible. So clearly you are an emergent leader.
Well, being true to that statement has required us to face the charge a little differently, I guess. Sure. So one of the things that we have built a pretty robust community integration program. So we have a community relations team that provides education to our community. If you want to change someone's life and prevent a heart attack, you've got to be there before that happens.
Right.
And so provide education on an assortment of topics, and it's provided by paramedics. People trust paramedics, and they want to hear from them. Excuse me. And so this gives us the opportunity to take a person who's actually experienced emergencies, put them in front of groups of people who can answer questions straight up about what they've seen, what they've done, and what you can do to avoid this in your life. And so that has a pretty big value, and it's important. So I guess that's kind of putting your money where your mouth is, right?
Definitely.
So we said the words. Now we have to live by that. That means you've got to, that's part of the process. Words matter, but actions matter more if you don't follow up with the right action that matches your words.
Right.
So yeah.
I just finished a 7-day program with Tony Robbins. I don't know. Have you ever watched his stuff or worked? So I just did it was a 7-day comeback challenge. In parentheses, it was a free program. So, I'm a big advocate of coaching and of going to those mentors and leaders who've done it already and, learning from them and learning what worked and what didn't work, really in the name of efficiency, but finding those experts. One of the things he talks about is you've got to take massive action. And if you continue to take massive action and, or pick John Maxwell, failing forward or, all of these concepts. Actually, he brought in Sarah Blakely, who's the CEO of Spanx. Maybe you may or may not be familiar with that company. I know most of the women listeners have at least heard of it, but she's an incredible entrepreneur. And one of the things that she speaks about in her journey is that something you hit on earlier. You said, I didn't really know that I shouldn't have done this, right? 2 weeks in, when I'm sitting in front of counsel, I didn't know better, but it served you. And so sometimes it's about finding that expert who's done it to say, here's how I've paved the path. Here's my lessons learned. Here's what worked for me. But there's also something to be said for just do it and, make it messy, as one of my business coaches teaches, Chalene Johnson. She's like, just do it, because in doing it, sometimes you get farther than following the path that you're supposed to follow, right? You learn things and people go, wait, who is this person? Why are they so confident? What do they know that I don't? And that confidence, maybe it's truly behind the scenes, it's an ignorance to the process, how it quote unquote should be. Sometimes
you just don't know any better.
Right, you just don't know any better. But sometimes that I don't know any better becomes what's better. So it's incredible to hear your journey and know that you've had successes in paving the path, Ernie. And I really appreciate you being on with us today and your time and sharing those experiences. So clearly one of the things that you do well is putting yourself out there, being engaged, being a leader for those behind you, ahead of you, next to you, all of the above. And you're on a few agencies and involved with a few boards at in the EMS agency as well. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yep. So
yeah, I think it's important. I'm kind of a quiet leader. I'm not one of those that likes to handle the drum myself. I try to find people that are great at what they do, better than I am at what they do. I know what I'm good at. I know what I'm not good at. I think it's important for every leader to know is what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, and then find others that are good at the things that you're not good at, and go turn them loose. Be surprised. They work even better when they know you trust them.
Right, and that trust comes with your actions following your words. So saying, "I trust you, go handle this," is different than "I trust you, go handle this. Hey, how are you going to handle it? What are you going to do? When are you going to give it to me?" It's "I trust you, go handle this." And you get to hold people to that level of accountability. When people feel, my experience has been, when people feel trusted, they're going to give you more. They're going to perform better than you would even ask them to, because they are excited, they're empowered. And so when you empower people to do incredible things, people do incredible things. So
that's right. Absolutely.
Ernie, so for our listeners, I again really appreciate you being on with us today. I want to close out every episode with hope, with empowerment, with tips and tools and those type of things. If you could leave our audience with one thing in the realm of leadership that's served you, what is that one thing?
I think I would have to say, don't be afraid to mess up, because it's those mistakes that make you better. And it's kind of like doing your calisthenics every day. You can add another 5 jumping jacks every time you get stronger, but you've got to make mistakes. If you live in fear and you're not willing to try different things, or you're not willing to say, oh, well, that didn't work, let's try again, then you're not ready to lead. You've got to be able to take and have the courage to take those risks that are important, that will move your agency forward. And by that, I don't mean just recklessly. You have to think about what you're doing. You have to weigh and measure, and you need to use information and data, and you need to be smart about it. But when it's time to pull the trigger, pull it and do it, and then see what happens, and then be willing to accept whatever comes. If it doesn't work, then you say, well, that didn't work. Here's what we were trying to do. Our goal was to do this. It didn't work, but we're going to change that. We're going to try this instead. And just stay persistent with it. Don't give up. And on the other hand, when something doesn't work enough and you figure out it doesn't work, don't be afraid to leave it and move on to the next thing. So you have to be agile and you have to be courageous. So those are the two things I think that go together if you want to be a good leader. Be agile and be courageous.
I love that. Ernie, thank you so much. I'm privileged to have had a handful of minutes to speak with you today, and thank you for sharing your journey with me and with our listeners. Austin, City of Austin and Texas, the industry are all very lucky to have you, sir, and appreciate your commitment to those things, but also to just the people around you, to your team, everyone you work with. So thank you for spending some time with me today, and I hope you'll join me again soon.
Thanks, Brett.
All right, thank you.